China and the United States must find a new path, one that's different from the inevitable confrontation and conflict between the major countries of the past. When China and the US work together, we can be an anchor to world stability and a propeller of world peace.
That was China's President Xi Jinping. Welcome back. We're talking about the economic competition and cooperation between the United States and China. Joining us from London is journalist and author Adrian Woolridge. With us here in Washington is Dan Ikinson. He's an economist and trade policy analyst with the Cato Institute, a public policy research organization. And joining us from Shanghai is a leading scholar and the president of the Shanghai Institutes for International Studies, Chen Dongxiao. Thanks again to all of you for being with us. Dan, we just heard there from President Xi Jinping, and I'm just wondering, do the two countries, the United States and China, see each other very differently? Does China see the United States primarily as a partner? And do people in the United States see China as a competitor?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think both ways. Certainly our actions have suggested, the U.S. actions have suggested that we are partners. We've accommodated China's rise. There is a lot of U.S. investment in China. Chinese investment is beginning to flow into the United States. We are negotiating agreements at the WTO for information technology agreement and environmental goods agreement. We're negotiating a large bilateral investment treaty, which will facilitate even more cross-border investment. So clearly, we recognize that there's a mutual dependence, and that together we can, if we cooperate, we can grow. And at the same time, I think in the United States, there's a sense of looking over one's shoulder because we are the incumbent power and we need to accommodate China's rise. And on some issues, we certainly don't see eye to eye. So there's been a debate, about whether or not we should accommodate China's rise and to what extent. But that's already happened, and it's been great for China. It's been great for the developing world, and it's going to pay dividends to have such a large country growing and being able to spread the wealth around the world.
Adrian, I want to get back to the establishment of the AIIB. What do you make of the fact that some of the United States' closest allies, France, United Kingdom, Israel, have decided to join the AIIB, and that's against the wishes of the United States. In fact, there's been some pretty tough language that's come out of the United States talking about these defectors who've joined the AIIB.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of nervousness in the United States that it is losing its top position and that some of its most trusted allies, not least the United Kingdom, are willing to get in bed with China. I think that's a false fear. I think it's a foolish fear because I think that it's inevitably going to be the case that Asia will play a much larger role and China will play a much larger role in shaping the 21st century than it did in the 20th century, and that any power, such as Britain, such as Israel, such as France or Germany, needs to have good, solid relations with that institution, with that country, and needs to get in on the ground floor of creating, the infrastructure bank. So it's a foolish fear. It's nevertheless, if you've been an incumbent for a long time, if you've been used to calling the shots, I can understand why people have the fear. I just wanted to go back very briefly to the question of resistance to the rise of China or anti-Chinese feeling in the United States. I think it's a periodical thing. It comes every now and again. There was a time when there was a great deal of fear of the rise of China and a great deal of very vigorous anti-Chinese sentiment, but that has been really completely displaced by Russia, by worries about Russia, fear of Russia. It's Putin that is in the center of people's mind when they think about that part of the world, and also, of course, the great worries about the Middle East. So China's sort of getting a pass because in some ways it stands for growth and stability and a partner that can be dealt with, rather than the Middle East, which stands for chaos, and Russia, which stands for a partner which very much can't be dealt with.
Dr. Chen, I was looking at some figures, and China already plays an increasingly important role in the success of the U.S. economy. U.S. companies, looking at these figures, have more than $70 billion invested in China, and Chinese companies have invested more than $10 billion in the U.S. in each of the past 2 years. Now, when you also factor in the fact that China imported $124 billion in U.S. goods and services, that is a pretty strong relationship. So how do both countries balance that relationship or partnership against places where they're actually going to start competing with each other?
Well, I think that the United States and China are the two biggest economies, and combined together, they covered almost 0.5% of the GDP. As you mentioned, those figures that both sides also have a highly interdependent in terms of the economy and in terms of trade and people-to-people exchange. And therefore, I think that those potential for their economic relationship for the further development is still huge. And having said that, we have seen a increasing number of differences with regard to, for instance, how to continue to make both markets open and will treat the companies from both sides to have investment in each other's in a more fair way. I think there are some differences. But anyway, I think that if we check those, both the positive as well as the negative list of those areas, we will see that those common overlapped interests is much bigger than that of those competing and even disputed areas. So I'm quite confident that in general ways, those list of those cooperation with regard to those economic cooperation and given those interdependence between two sides will be on the rise. So I'm quite confident that the U.S.-China relationship will maintain its what we call a competition plus cooperation is kind of a new normal for both for these countries for a long period of time.
Adrian, do you agree with those sentiments? We're going to see less competition, more cooperation.
I think we're going to see both. As business professors like to use the phrase co-opetition, which is a mixture of competition and cooperation. I think that's exactly the relationship that we're going to have with China. But I think there is a sense that we don't have to have losers from this as long as we manage the process properly. The global economy can grow. These two engines can be at the heart of that growth, so long as they manage their relationship intelligently.
Dan, looking to the future, President Obama has said that he's all for this bank, the AIIB. Do you see the day when perhaps the U.S. will join the AIIB?
Yeah, I think that's quite possible. I think it's reevaluating not only its original opposition to the bank, but its attempts at compelling allies not to join and recognizing that it's looking a bit foolish, almost like an aging starlet expressing jealousy over a young actress who's rising. Look, this is a great way for China to become more of a responsible stakeholder. There are huge infrastructure demands throughout developing Asia. The United States, as one of my colleagues on the show has alluded to, has decided not to vote on the IMF rules to grant greater authority to China. And this, I think the United States looks a little bit silly if it doesn't embrace this. And so I think for that reason it will.
Okay, that's where we have to leave it. Thanks to all of you for joining us. That's it for this edition of The Heat, but the conversation continues online. Join us on CCTV America's Facebook page to comment on this or any other show, or chat with us on Twitter at cctv_America. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for being with us.